Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on quite a journey. We're diving into one of humanity's most profound texts, the Bhagavad Gita.
It really is. And while it might seem complex, maybe even a bit intimidating at first glance,
Yeah, it can feel that way.
it actually holds some surprisingly clear, universal wisdom, stuff that speaks to anyone, really.
Absolutely. So, for this deep dive, we've really gone through a comprehensive review of the Gita. We looked at its structure, the deep philosophical ideas, its main themes, and maybe most importantly.
It's real-world applications, how it actually connects to life today.
Exactly.
And our mission here, is to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights from this ancient text.
Kind of a shortcut.
Sort of, yeah. A shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about its core teachings and why it's still so powerful now. And it's crucial to get this up front. It's not just a religious text.
Right, much broader.
It's a universal philosophical guide,
Mm.
even a psychological one. It deals with the human condition.
And the setting is just so striking, isn't it? This profound conversation happens,
On a battlefield, right before a huge war.
which seems counterintuitive, but it gives it this incredible relevance, I think. For anyone facing confusion, maybe a moral dilemma?
Or even just those big existential questions we all grapple with sometimes.
Yeah. And we'll even touch on its influence on people you might not expect, like Gandhi, obviously, but also Oppenheimer.
That connection always surprises people.
It really does. So maybe let's start with the basics, just to ground everyone. What is the Bhagavad Gita?
Okay, so the name itself, Bhagavad Gita, translates roughly to the Song of God.
The Song of God. Okay.
And it's a 700-verse scripture. It's actually a relatively small but incredibly important part of a much larger Indian epic.
The Mahabharata, right.
Exactly. Specifically, it's found in Book 6 of the Mahabharata, the section called Bhishma Parva.
Got it. So it's nestled within this giant epic.
That's right. And at its core, the Gita is a dialogue. It's a conversation between Prince Arjuna, a great warrior, who's facing this immense moral crisis right before the battle. And he's talking to Lord Krishna.
Who's acting as his charioteer.
Right, his charioteer. But much more than that. He's Arjuna's spiritual guide, his mentor through this crisis.
And that battlefield setting, Kritika, it's not just literal.
No, not at all. I mean, it is a literal battlefield in the story, but it's deeply symbolic. It represents the inner battlefield.
To conflicts within ourselves.
Precisely. The dilemmas, the struggles between duty and emotion, right and wrong. All that internal stuff we all deal with.
And despite its depth, you mentioned it has a clear structure.
It really does, which helps navigate it. It's organized into 18 chapters. Each chapter is called an Adhyaya.
18 chapters, okay.
And these chapters, they aren't just random. They're grouped quite neatly into 3 main sections, focusing on different paths or disciplines, called yogas.
Ah, okay. So what are these sections?
Well, the first 6 chapters, chapters 1 to 6, focus on karma yoga, the path of selfless action, how to act in the world effectively and ethically.
Okay, action. Then the next part.
Chapters 7 through 12, that section explores bhakti yoga.
Bhakti. That's devotion.
Exactly, the path of devotion, connecting through love and surrender.
And the final section.
Chapters 13 to 18, this covers jnana yoga.
Jnana, knowledge.
Yes, the path of knowledge and wisdom, understanding the true nature of reality and the self.
Action, devotion, knowledge. That's a helpful framework. And you mentioned something about it being practical.
Yeah, this is really key. Our source material points out that each chapter actually concludes with a line calling it a yoga shastra.
A manual for practice.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
A scripture and a practical manual for spiritual discipline. It's meant to be applied, lived, not just read.
Okay, so if it's meant to be lived,
Yeah.
let's get into those core ideas. What are the big transformative takeaways, the real nuggets?
Right. Let's dig in. One of the absolute cornerstones, especially in karma yoga, is this idea of duty without attachment.
Okay, I've heard this phrase. What does it really mean?
Well, there's a famous verse, 2.47, that says something like, "You have the right to perform your actions, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions."
Perform the action, but don't claim the results.
Exactly. Krishna tells Arjuna to focus on doing his duty, on performing the action itself, with excellence and commitment.
But without being attached to whether it leads to success or failure.
Precisely. Don't worry about the outcome. Just focus on the integrity of the action. For you, listening now, think about your work or maybe a personal project.
Okay.
Instead of getting totally fixated on, say, getting that promotion or praise or whatever the result is. The Gita says focus purely on doing the work well, on the effort itself.
That shift in focus, it seems like it could take a lot of pressure off.
It really can. It frees you from the anxiety of what if. And ironically, sometimes that detachment actually leads to better results because you're more present and focused on the task.
It sounds freeing, definitely, but also really hard to do in practice, especially when the stakes feel high. How does the Gita suggest we cultivate that?
It's definitely a practice, not a switch you just flip. And it connects directly to another core teaching, self-realization and the eternal soul, the concept of the Atman.
The soul, the true self.
Yes. The Gita describes the soul, your essential nature, as eternal. It's indestructible, it was never born, it never dies.
Okay.
It uses this really vivid analogy in verse 2.22. Death is just like changing clothes. The body changes, but the wearer, the soul, remains.
Changing clothes. That's memorable.
It is. And understanding this, or even just contemplating it, helps you deal with impermanence. Life is full of changes, right? Jobs, relationships, health.
All the time.
Seeing the self as unchanging beneath all that flux, it provides an anchor, a sense of stability within the change. And building on that idea of inner stability, there's a strong emphasis on detachment and equanimity.
Equanimity, like balance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Krishna advises Arjuna and us to remain balanced. Balanced in pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat, not getting swept away by the highs or crushed by the lows.
Maintaining an even keel, regardless of circumstance.
That's the goal. And this state of balance, this equanimity, is seen as a path to liberation, moksha, freedom from the cycle of suffering, birth, and death. For you, this practice helps navigate life's ups and downs with more resilience.
It sounds like a kind of emotional regulation almost.
In a very profound way, yes. It stops you from being completely reactive to external events.
So what stops us from achieving that state? What gets in the way?
Well, the Gita has a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
It talks about the illusion of ego and Maya.
Maya illusion.
Right. The idea is that a lot of our suffering comes from Maya, this sort of cosmic illusion, and specifically from wrongly identifying ourselves with things that are temporary, like the physical body, our thoughts, our emotions, and especially the ego, that sense of I and mine.
We think that's who we are.
Exactly. But the Gita says our true self is deeper than that. It encourages us to rise above this illusion, to see the self more as a detached witness to the play of life, rather than getting completely lost in the drama.
So it prompts a question then. What illusions might I be holding on to about myself or success or...
Precisely. It's an invitation to self-reflection. What assumptions are causing you unnecessary pain because they're based on this false identification?
Okay, so that covers some of the action and knowledge paths. What about bhakti yoga, devotion?
Right, devotion and surrender. This is a really powerful path emphasized in the middle chapters. It suggests that surrendering to the divine, however you conceive of that, with pure love and faith, is a direct route to liberation.
Surrender. That can be a challenging concept for some.
It can be, but here it means trust, faith, letting go of the ego's need to control everything. There's a beautiful assurance, like in verse 9.22, where Krishna essentially says, whoever surrenders to me with love, I take care of them, I remove their darkness.
So it's about the power of trust and faith in something larger than oneself?
Yes, it offers a profound sense of connection, peace, and guidance, especially when facing difficulties.
And finally, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. What does that entail?
Knowledge and discrimination. Here, true knowledge isn't just intellectual understanding. It's realizing the fundamental oneness of all existence.
Oneness.
Seeing that the same divine essence dwells in every heart, in all beings. It's recognizing that interconnectedness.
That sounds very unifying.
It is. And Jnana Yoga also involves discrimination, the ability to distinguish between the real and the unreal, the eternal and the temporary. The Gita carefully differentiates between the physical body, the mind, the intellect, and the true self, the Atman.
So understanding the different layers of our being.
Exactly. Knowing what's the temporary vehicle and what's the permanent essence. This discrimination brings clarity to your thoughts, your actions, your whole perspective on life.
Okay, so these are the core teachings. If we step back a bit and look at the bigger philosophical picture, what are the main underpinnings here?
Good question. An absolutely central concept is non-duality and unity. It's often linked to Vedanta philosophy.
Non-duality, meaning not to.
Right. The idea that ultimately, despite the appearance of separation and diversity in the world, everything is interconnected. Everything is fundamentally one divine reality.
So seeing the unity behind the apparent differences.
Yes, and this isn't just abstract. It has ethical implications. If everything is one, then harming another is, in a sense, harming yourself. It fosters empathy, compassion.
That makes sense. What else?
Well, it tackles that perennial question of free will versus destiny.
Always a big one. What's the Gita's take?
It's quite nuanced. It suggests that while some broad life patterns or consequences of past actions, karma, might create a sort of framework, maybe call it destiny, our present actions are crucial.
So we still have agency.
Absolutely. Our choices, our karma in the present moment, actively shape our future path. It's a balance between accepting certain cosmic currents and taking full responsibility for our actions. Now, you're not just a puppet, but you're also part of a larger order.
So it avoids simple fatalism.
Definitely. It empowers action. And another significant influence, especially when discussing discrimination, is Sankhya philosophy.
Sankhya, how does that fit in?
Krishna introduces concepts from Sankhya to help Arjuna understand the difference between Prakriti and Purusha.
Okay, what are those?
Prakriti is roughly the material nature, the physical world, the body, the mind, everything that changes and is perishable. Purusha is the conscious principle, the pure awareness, the true self, which is eternal and unchanging.
The seer versus the seen.
That's a good way to put it. And the Gita teaches that a lot of our confusion and suffering comes from mistaking Prakriti, the temporary stuff, for our true identity, which is Purusha, the eternal consciousness. Understanding this distinction is key to liberation.
Right, that distinction seems fundamental to applying many of the other lessons. Okay, so connecting all this profound philosophy back down to earth, what does this ancient wisdom really mean for you, the listener, navigating modern life?
Yeah, let's make it concrete. Think about your career and duty. The Gita's message is, focus on doing your best work. Find satisfaction in the effort itself, not just the promotion or the paycheck. Detach from the outcome.
Okay. And for things like stress.
For stress and anxiety, it's huge. That detachment from results, letting go of ego-driven worries about success or failure, that's a direct path to finding calm in the midst of activity. Peace isn't found by stopping activity, but by changing your relationship to it.
Interesting. How about relationships?
In relationships, the advice is to act out of duty, love, and respect, treating people equally and fairly without selfish expectations or clinging. This fosters healthier, less transactional connections.
And making tough choices.
For decision-making, the guidance is clear. Let wisdom, ethics, and your sense of duty, dharma, guide you, rather than being swayed by momentary emotions or desires. This leads to more sound, principled choices.
And for personal or spiritual growth?
Well, the Gita basically lays out a multifaceted path. Spiritual growth comes through a combination of bhakti, devotion, jnana, self-study reflection, karma yoga, selfless service, and meditation. It offers various tools for inner development.
It really covers a lot of ground. Its staying power over centuries is quite remarkable.
It absolutely is, and its strengths are pretty clear. First, its universality. Its core messages about duty, detachment, self-awareness, they resonate across different cultures, religions, and eras.
It's not just for Hindus.
Not at all.
No.
Second, its deep psychological wisdom. It really delves into the internal landscape, motivation, conflict, fear, desire. It's incredibly insightful about the human mind.
Yeah, the inner battlefield idea.
Exactly. Third, it's very action-oriented. It doesn't advocate escaping the world. It teaches how to live in the world effectively and spiritually. Fulfill your duties, but do it with the right mindset.
So engage, don't retreat.
Right. And finally, it offers a balanced path. It doesn't say only devotion matters or only knowledge or only action. It harmonizes all three, karma, bhakti, jnana, into a holistic approach.
Okay, but like any ancient, complex text, are there potential pitfalls or criticisms?
Sure, and it's good to be aware of them. One potential issue is the fatalism risk. If someone misinterprets karma yoga, they might think, well, it's all fated anyway, why bother acting?
Becoming passive.
Exactly, but that's a misunderstanding. The Gita emphasizes conscious, responsible action, not resignation. Another point often raised is the justification of war question, given the setting.
Right, the battlefield.
But, as we discussed, the overwhelming interpretation, both traditional and modern, is that the battlefield is symbolic of internal, ethical, and spiritual struggles. It's not meant as a literal endorsement of violence.
The inner conflict is the real war being discussed.
That's the dominant view. And finally, just pragmatically, the complex language. Some verses are dense, metaphorical, and can be challenging to grasp without good commentary or guidance.
So having a good translation or teacher helps.
Definitely. It can make a big difference in unlocking the deeper meanings.
But despite those potential hurdles, its influence is just undeniable, isn't it? You mentioned Gandhi earlier.
Yes, Mahatma Gandhi famously called the Gita his spiritual dictionary. He drew heavily on its principles, especially karma yoga and non-attachment, for his philosophy of nonviolent resistance, satyagraha. It was foundational for him.
And the Oppenheimer connection, that's so striking.
It is. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist leading the Manhattan Project, after witnessing the first atomic bomb test, the Trinity test, he famously recalled a line from the Gita, chapter 11, verse 32.
The now I am become death line.
The destroyer of worlds. Yes.
Yeah.
It's debated exactly what he meant, but it shows the Gita's verses resonated with him at this incredibly profound, world-altering moment. It speaks of the text's power to capture ultimate realities, even terrifying ones.
Wow. And it's not just historical figures, right? People use it today.
Absolutely. You find corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, professionals turning to the Gita for insights on ethical leadership, stress management, finding meaning in work, decision-making. Its principles are seen as very relevant to modern challenges.
That's fascinating. If someone listening wants to explore it further themselves, any recommended translations?
Yeah, there are many great ones in English. For clarity and a spiritual focus, Eknath Easwaran's translation is very popular. For a more traditional, detailed perspective, Swami Sivananda is excellent.
Okay.
Swami Prabhupada's version, from the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, offers a strong devotional interpretation. And for a more academic, philosophically rich approach, Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan's translation and commentary is highly regarded.
So several good options depending on what you're looking for.
Exactly. Plenty of paths to explore it directly.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
if we had to distill the essence of the Bhagavad Gita.
I'd say, in essence, it teaches us how to live a life of purpose and inner peace. By performing our duties with conscious action, karma yoga, cultivating detachment from outcomes, developing love and trust, bhakti yoga, and seeking true self-knowledge, jnana yoga.
It's a guide to fulfilling our responsibilities while progressing towards inner freedom and understanding ultimate truth.
Beautifully put. It shows how to navigate the complexities of life while staying connected to something deeper.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to take away.
Well, given that the Gita's central conflict, Arjuna's dilemma on the battlefield, is really a metaphor for universal human struggles, maybe ask yourself this.
Okay.
What inner battlefield are you navigating right now in your own life? What conflicts, duties, or decisions are you facing? And perhaps, just perhaps, what piece of guidance from this ancient text might surprisingly resonate or apply to your situation today?
That's a powerful question to sit with. What's my Kurukshetra and what wisdom does the Gita offer me there?
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the Bhagavad Gita. We hope these insights offer something valuable for you to reflect on.